Hey guys, welcome to MacReddit. Today, I have compiled some of the most interesting Reddit stories for you. Let's dive into them, without wasting any time. I, 29-year-old female, and my fiancé, Dave, 31M, are due to get married in a few months. Everything has gone smoothly with the planning until about a fortnight ago, when my soon-to-be sister-in-law, Lily, 34F, started getting involved. She has been a vegetarian for over a decade and advocates passionately for animal rights. I respect her choice, but she is the type that will guilt people at family barbecues for having a burger and send graphic animal cruelty videos to the family group chat. When we sent out our wedding invites, Lily called me immediately and asked if we would be having a vegetarian menu. I told her we'd have a plethora of vegetarian dishes, but the main course would be meat because most of our guests were not vegetarian. This totally threw Lily for a loop, and she let me know that having meat at a wedding in 2024 was completely tone-deaf and asked if we would consider making the whole menu vegetarian. I said no, a big no, and told her that we wanted to provide diversity so all of our guests feel at ease. She did not let the matter drop and began sending me recipes for so-called scrumptious vegan entrees and links to catering companies specializing in plant-based wedding menus. I ignored everything from her, thinking she would let the subject die off. But she upped the ante. She called her brother and tried to get him to convince me that we were promoting cruelty because we wanted to serve meat on our special day. My fiancé told her that it was our decision and she needed to back off. But she continued pushing, saying it was a family matter and that I was being inconsiderate for not taking her lifestyle into account. Her demands were unreasonable, but it came to a head last night when my would-be sister-in-law texted in our family group chat saying she would boycott the wedding if we didn't agree to a completely vegetarian menu, saying she couldn't, in good conscience, attend a celebration that served dead animals, and attending would go against her values. Initially, I tried to ignore her messages in the group, but when a few other family members started supporting her unreasonable demands and started saying so-and-so about our behavior towards animals and other bullshit, I finally replied. I told her and other vegetarian relatives that if you guys didn't like our wedding menu, there was no need to attend our wedding. On top of it, my fiancé thumbed up on my message. Most people in the group supported us, and my sister-in-law and other veggies left the chat. I thought it was over, but no. The next day, I got a call from my fiancé's parents, who invited me and my fiancé to their home to discuss the matter. Now, they are trying to influence us to take my would-be sister-in-law's request to keep the peace. They suggest going meatless for at least the reception dinner. My fiancé and I are frustrated because we have already finalized the menu, paid deposits, and worked so hard to create a balanced selection for everyone. On top of all this, we can't let my sister-in-law dictate our wedding. Can I be an AH here? OP is certainly not an AH. It is completely unreasonable and entitled to demand a vegetarian menu. On top of that, OP's would-be sister-in-law is blaming OP for cruelty for eating meat. It is weird for so-called activists to demand vegetarianism. It can be a choice, but it is not human nature. Humans are omnivores, and they eat both meat and plant-based foods, and they would be. I think these people don't understand the basic natural laws and are not familiar with the food web. They need to learn. Eating meat is not tone-deaf. Instead, forcing others to eat grass is. If it is about life, dude, plants are alive. Don't say they don't feel pain. If one of your siblings cannot feel pain, would you eat them? Here, OP is clearly not an AH, and I would give her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP's sister-in-law is clearly an AH. So, I would rate her 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to another Am I the A-hole, where OP's incompetent son demands that he hand over his business to him. For the last 30 years, I have grown a large local hardware business in my town that has 3 main branches and 2 small shops. It all started as a tiny shop making ends meet. Now it is a full-blown business generating handsome revenue. I always hoped it would be a legacy I could pass down, something that would stay in the family. I have 2 children, Emma, 30-year-old female, and my son Jake, 28-year-old male. My daughter works in finance and has a good career. On the other hand, my son has been in and out of odd jobs since high school. My daughter has always been the epitome of independence and grit. I am very proud of her, whereas my son never really seemed to get his footing. He dropped out of college twice and came home more times than I can count with empty pockets. After the failure of his so-called business ventures, most of them were funded by me. All his failures were solely because of his irresponsible irresponsible behavior. I love both my kids, but there is a clear distinction between their responsibility levels. My son has been working part-time at one of our hardware stores, but he only does so because I insisted he do something constructive with his time. He wasn't exactly a model employee. He would often come in late, sometimes missing entire days without a word, and basically just go through the motions. Still, I kept him on because he's my son, and I hoped he'd eventually mature and take the job seriously. A year ago, I began planning to pull back from working myself and maybe retire in 5 years or so. That's when the trouble started. Jake assumed that because he was working there, I would automatically hand the business over to him when I retired. One day, I was out to lunch, and he made a comment about taking over the business. I laughed it off because, honestly speaking, I had never seen any evidence that he was ready to run the business, let alone take ownership. Initially, I thought that was just wishful thinking on his part, but for the last 6 months, my son kept coming every month with it, asking to know the financials, wanting to know when I will retire, and even suggesting changes to the way I ran things. So 2 months ago, I finally sat him down and told him straight up that he wasn't ready to take over the store. I explained that I needed someone responsible who would actually show up on time, work hard, and make the business a priority. I said I would stand beside him and help him learn what he needs to run the business if he is really serious about this being a career move. But currently, he wouldn't be handed the keys just because of his last name. He flipped out, insisting this was his right to inherit the business because he was the only son, and how I was being unfair to him as compared to Emma. It turned into a massive argument, and he stormed out of the office, refusing to come in for the next 3 weeks. After 3 months, he returned to the business because of the involvement of my wife and daughter Emma. However, his behavior went south after his return. He became rude to customers and his co-workers, and started messing up orders on purpose. So I had to sit him down once again. I told him that if he didn't straighten up, I would just kick him out no matter he is my son. He agreed to mend his behavior, but he didn't. Last week, one of the higher-ranking staff members told me that my son was bad-mouthing other workers, saying how he was going to be the new boss soon, and that when I retire, he was going to run things his way. He went far enough to say that I'm too old-fashioned, and that he has big plans to modernize the business. He didn't even deny anything when I confronted him with this in an employee meeting on the matter. Instead, he smugly informed me that it was just a matter of time, and I should get used to the idea. I was furious. I immediately told him that if he thinks he could waltz in here and take it over, he's sorely mistaken because this is my business, and it's going to stay that way until I decide otherwise. That's when he made an ultimatum. Either I give him control of the business by the end of the year, or he's leaving, cutting all ties with me. I told him that I don't need him at my business. He has been absent ever since, unwilling to talk to me. My wife is distraught, and now my daughter is also pushing me to set my relationship right with my son. They have even been threatening me to cut ties with me if I don't rectify things. I am totally confused, and I want an outside perspective on whether I am in the wrong, and what should be the best response in this situation. OP is not the AH here. Instead, Jake's behavior is very irresponsible. He behaves as if he were the prince of a classical empire, demanding kingship. OP's approach is not to pass down the legacy until Jake proves himself to be a responsible and competent son. So, it is clear that OP deserves 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP's son is an AH. I would rate him 2 out of 5. OP's wife and daughter are also being unreasonable, and I would also give them 0.5 out of 5. My mom, now 53-year-old female, has been married 3 times, divorced twice. One of his husbands died, and now she is engaged to another man named Greg, 55-year-old male. He is the 4th. I don't say Greg is a bad or good guy. In fact, I don't care. He is not my problem. Actually, my problem is my mom and her weird behavior. For example, I grew up watching my mom jump from one bed to another. She would completely shift her world around every single man that came into her life. She completely gave herself over to the relationship, and I always felt like an afterthought. But the worst was when she married her second husband, Derek, when I was 15, and it was terrible because Derek made it very clear that he didn't want me around. He never did say it outright, but you would hear him make little remarks regarding the fact that children need to be respectful to adults, and that independence should come early. He always pushed my mom to send me to my father's place, and my mom finally sent me to my father without even blinking an eye. This was really the turning point in our relationship. After moving with my father, I ended my high school and then moved out. My life became independent to a large extent. Since I left, or you can say was made to leave, My mom's home, my relationship with her, have been very unstable. In fact, the nature of our relationship has changed. Now, I see my mom as a random relative or neighbor or old colleague. Years have passed wherein we talked here and there, and she'd apologize for how things turned out, but I never really felt that she could personally empathize with what I have had to go through. She has always seemed sorry for herself rather than sorry for the pain I have gone through. Fast forward to today. My mom is marrying Greg and is having the biggest wedding of her life. She has been calling me non-stop for months now, asking to help her plan, from picking flowers to places and her wedding dress, which I, quite honestly, didn't feel the energy to do. I had also been working full-time, trying to get my own savings together for my place and all the personal things. I told her that I would definitely attend her wedding, but I could not be deeply involved in the planning of that. Apparently, it was not enough for her. She started sending me guilt-trippy messages, telling me how I am the only daughter that she had, and how important it was for her to get me involved with her during this special time. I explained to her that I was busy and there was no way for me to make time out from my schedule. She would not let it go. She even went so far as to say, "You are selfish. I am your mother and have always been there for you. Why can't you just do this one thing for me?" That really huffed me off. She's always there for me? Seriously? Where was she when her husband kicked me out of his home? Why did she not stand for me? Didn't even spoke a word for me? Where was she when I had to learn how to navigate life on my own? Because she was too busy chasing after men and jumping from bed to bed. I finally snapped and said, "I'm not being selfish. You've never been there for me, so don't expect me to bend over backward for your wedding." She was shocked and went silent for a while before hanging up on me. A few days later, I got a call from one of my aunts, telling me that I needed to apologize because I hurt my mom's feelings and that family comes first. My mother hasn't spoken to me since and has informed the entire family that I won't attend her wedding. Here is the thing. I had planned to attend her wedding, ignoring all what she did to me in the past and her ignoring behavior towards me. But now, I don't want to attend just because of her behavior and lack of realization that she has not been a mom to me. I don't feel right about being there and pretending everything is fine when our relationship has always been trashy. I am sorry. Now, my maternal aunts and uncles are messaging me saying I am being heartless and should reconsider my decision, but I don't think I am wrong. I am just setting my boundaries, and I have every right to do this. However, I'm a little bit confused. So, am I the AH here? OP is certainly not an AH here. Despite the fact that OP's mom neglected her emotional needs growing up and let her be kicked out, OP was willing to attend her mom's wedding, but OP mom is demanding too much, which is of course unreasonable, and OP's mom is being an AH here. So, on the AH scale, I would rate OP's 2.5 out of 5, and of course OP deserves 0 out of 5. Let's now move on to another the AH. I, 33-year-old female, have been married to my husband James, 35-year-old male, for 5 years. We live in a very beautiful 3-bedroom house in a good suburb. Both of us work full-time. We have no children yet, but we plan to start soon. Life has really been pretty stable until lately, when my brother, Mark, 37-year-old male, was divorced, so things have really been turned upside down. Mark and I had never been close. While growing up, he was the golden boy, and I was the quiet one who always hid himself in books. Our parents doted upon him because he was the firstborn and the star athlete and the most popular one in school, and I kept out of everyone's way, keeping my head in my books. I didn't resent it, but surely it kept us far apart. After high school, all of us went our separate ways. Mark entered construction, married his high school sweetheart, Jessica, and apparently had a very good life. I went off to college, earned a degree in accounting, and forged my own way. Over the past few years, however, Mark's life only continued to unravel. His marriage broke apart, partially from drinking, but more so by a lack of responsibility. He lost his job or two, unwilling to take significant action again in life. His wife made it stick as long as she could, but eventually hit her breaking point and bailed out with a divorce. Part of the divorce settlement required them to sell the home they owned together, and Mark has nowhere to call home. He's been crashing with friends, but they can't really keep him long term, so he asked if he could come live with me and my husband for a few months while he works things out. Now here is the elephant in the room. I love my brother, but he is most certainly not an easy person to live with. Growing up, he was always a little bit irresponsible. Since his divorce, it has gotten much, much worse. Throughout his life, he has been messy, disrespectful of other people's space, and downright rude in a totally unacceptable way if he didn't get his way. And then to top it off, he's still drinking, which he assures me is under control. I have heard otherwise through friends and family, and have seen firsthand the amount of stress and chaos that he brings with him everywhere. Frankly, I don't want that kind of energy in my home. I told my brother that I was uncomfortable having him live with me, and it was not too well received by him. He got angry with me for not being considerate of him at that moment. He said that as his sister, I was supposed to be there for him, especially during a crappy time like this. He said I am selfish, saying this since we are family, one should take care of each other. He played the "if the shoe were on the other foot" card, and claimed he would put up with me if I were in his position. But my issue is, I know that this would be no short-term arrangement. My brother's record shows that he has not been able to keep any position for long. Moreover, he tends to blame everyone else for his troubles. If he is allowed to come in, I am pretty certain that he would stay there for months or years, without practically doing anything to rebuild his life. And such instability would be unbearable in my place, especially since Chris and I plan to start raising a family soon. I explained all of this to him, but he just pressed the cold-hearted label on me, telling me I'm letting him down at his most hurtful time. My parents also pressure me, saying it's temporary and it'll pass, but suggesting I show some mercy. They don't get the point that I won't sacrifice my peace of mind and my marriage to bail my brother out of the mess in which he finds himself. Since then, my brother and parents have been angry with me, and I am not sure whether my decision was wrong or right. So, am I the AH here? OP is not an AH for setting boundaries, for which she has every right. Her brother's instability and irresponsible behavior are harmful and pose a potential negative impact on OP's life and future family plans. So, OP is clear, and I would rate her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. In contrast, OP's brother is an AH, and deserves at least 2 out of 5 on the AH scale. OP's parents are also AH, and I would rate them 1.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. I, 29-year-old female, have a younger brother, Mike, 25-year-old male. He has been delinquent since his teens. Recently, my brother crashed my mom's car, resulting in severe injuries to some people, and now he is detained. My parents wanted me to pay for his bail, but I refused because it is his routine, and I want him to learn a lesson this time. Background: my brother has always been the wild child of the family. Growing up, Mike was always in trouble, sneaking out, getting into fights at school, skipping classes. You name it, he did it. Our parents had tried everything, from therapies to boot camps, but nothing worked for him, and he is still on his way. I, on the other hand, was the good kid, now the good adult. I did well in school, stayed out of trouble, got my degree without any loans, thanks to a scholarship, and now I am working a very well-paying job at an IT giant, and living with my husband, Rob, 32-year-old male. My brother's behavior has not changed over the years. If anything, it has become more serious. My brother got into all kinds of trouble, from smoking weed, petty theft, and reckless driving to worse cases. Last year, he got into a bar fight that left the other guy in the hospital. Mike was charged with assault, and we had to bail him out because we could not imagine jail life for him. After that, we had to pay a handsome amount to the victim party in an out-of-court settlement. After the fight, my brother promised that he would change his ways, but all his promises proved to be wrong, and only about a month later, he started doing what he had been in. Last week, while driving under the influence, my brother crashed his car and injured 3 people and got arrested for the same, and my parents learned about his arrest from the police. The next day, they were on their knees begging me to give them a helping hand, saying they needed $10,000 for my brother's bail. Apparently, they had already drained their savings helping him out in the past, and now they come crying to me because I bring home good money. No doubt, I am financially stable and doing very well for myself, and I don't have an unlimited supply of money to bail my brother out every month. My husband and I have been really careful with our money, and we have been saving up to buy our first home. Now, I can pay for my brother's bail, but honestly speaking, I cannot afford it, and if I pay, it would really set back our savings. It is not all about money. I am watching my parents, literally and figuratively, bail him out all the time. My parents have been carrying him on for years, and I'm not going to become a part of that. So, I told my mom that I would not do it, and she went berserk. She said that I was abandoning my brother at his time of need and turning my back on the family. She even did the worst possible guilt trip on me by telling me that if my brother stayed in jail, being incarcerated would destroy his life. I told my mom that he had already destroyed his life and had been destroying it for the past decade. This time, bailing him out isn't going to help him. It'll only help make sure he can screw up as much as he wants, because someone will always be there to bail him out. My dad called me later in an attempt to take a calmer approach. He said he understood my perspective, but asked if he could discuss the matter with me. He said they didn't know what else to do, and that they cannot stand seeing my brother inside the jail. I stonewalled him. I told him that perhaps sometime inside the jail would be the wake-up call my brother needs to finally get his act together. My dad sighed and said that he was highly disappointed that I was dumping my family. When my extended family learned about my refusal to bail out my brother, they started gossiping about me and my relationship with my family. Some of them took it even further, saying I'm being too harsh and asking me to show some compassion toward my brother. I told them that my brother is an adult and he needs to think about his behavior on his own, and I am not responsible for making things right for him. My parents and I have been doing a lot for him, but he is not ready to mend his ways. I love my brother, but I'm just so tired of the drama surrounding his life. Due to my parents' constant attempts to make me realize that family is everything, and my relatives' continuous taunts and gossiping about my relationship with my family, I am confused whether my refusal is the right decision. I just want to ask whether I am AH here. OP is not an AH, and she is not responsible for bailing out her brother, who has a history of irresponsible behavior. Paying for his bail would only enable him further, as his parents have been enabling him for years. Honestly speaking, OP's parents are being unreasonable for demanding that OP pay for bailing out her brother. Normally, I don't believe in tough love, but in this case, it seems that tough love is needed to push OP's brother toward real accountability and change. Let's now jump onto another Am I the AH? I, 26-year-old female, have been in a relationship with my boyfriend James, 27-year-old male, for over a year. Things were going pretty well overall, until his ex-girlfriend, Emma, 27-year-old female, reappeared in his life. James and Emma had been friends since their childhood and dated throughout college, spending 5 years together until their breakup 2 years ago. After their breakup, Emma moved to another city, possibly for a job. However, 6 months ago, she returned to our town, and 2 months ago in our lives. One day, my boyfriend told me that she had a talk with her ex who had returned to our town, and that she had recently broken up with her boyfriend and was going through a tough time and needed support. The next day, my boyfriend invited her to our flat, where I met her, and in fact, we had dinner together. But soon, she was there all of the time, coming by every weeknight and most weekends, sometimes staying until close to dark. At first, I was cool with it because I trusted my boyfriend, but when it seemed to be coming to a head, I brought it up to my boyfriend and told him that it was making me uncomfortable, but he laughed it off, saying I was being melodramatic, that Emma was like a friend to him now. He told me there was nothing to be concerned about. I made an effort to be understanding, but did not succeed. After some time, I started feeling like a third wheel in my home. One Saturday night, I got home after hanging out with some friends. My boyfriend and his ex-girlfriend were sitting on the couch, watching a movie together and sharing a blanket. When I approached him about this, he brushed it off. It all finally came to a head yesterday. I came home early, only to find Emma in the kitchen, cooking dinner for both of them. They were laughing and carrying on like an old married couple. When I asked my boyfriend what was going on, he rolled his eyes and said I needed to stop being so insecure. I told him that it was not about insecurity. It was our relationship being hurt by an outsider. He said that Emma was just his friend. I said that it is not possible that she was just a friend, given the fact that they had been in a relationship for more than 5 years. I told him clearly that if Emma continued to hang out with him, I would leave him no matter what, and that I could not stand her hanging out. When he tried to say something, I stopped him and said, "Emma or me, no other option," and then retreated to the bedroom. I think Emma had listened to our conversation, so she left soon after without dinner. Then my boyfriend came to the bedroom yelling at me, saying I was abandoning him when he was doing his best to support a friend, and that it was not fair to make him choose between me and someone who needs him now. We had a heated argument and went to bed angry. I do not want to break up, but at the same time, I just cannot feel myself pushed to the side like this. So, am I the AH here? OP is not an AH. Her feelings are completely valid, and it is not unreasonable for OP to be uncomfortable with her boyfriend spending excessive time with his ex-girlfriend. It is 100% justified. How can OP's boyfriend say that his ex-girlfriend is now his boyfriend? It is not possible in the world of emotions. You cannot just undo things like this. OP's boyfriend is an AH, a big AH, so I would give him 3.5 out of 5. And OP is an innocent soul, so I would rate her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. I, 33-year-old female, am getting married to my fiancé Jack, 35-year-old male, in 2 months. We have been planning our wedding for the past year. Among other things, we agreed that our wedding would be child-free. When I told my half-sister about this, she became very angry and is now not attending my wedding. Background: I have a half-sister, Amy, 38-year-old female. She was just 2 when her mother died of cancer. After her death, our father married my mom. My mom brought up Amy like her own daughter. And in fact, I didn't initially know that we were half-sisters. We have been very close throughout our life. But now this dispute arose from my choice to have a child-free wedding. For the last year, my fiancé and I have been planning our wedding, and we are going to tie the knot in 2 months. During our planning, one of the things we agreed on was that our wedding would be child-free. My fiancé and I both come from pretty large families, but we both really want to have a classy, adult-only wedding. Also, the venue we have chosen for the wedding doesn't allow little kids on the premises after hours. So, a child-free wedding is the best option for us. No one had an issue with the child-free wedding except my half-sister. She has 3 kids: Ella, 10F, Max, 7M, and Sophie, 4F. She always brings them everywhere with her and hardly goes to an event without them. I knew this was going to be hard for her, but I needed to explain our reason for doing it. Thus, when I called her to discuss the issue, she immediately became defensive. What do you mean I can't bring the kids? They're your nieces and nephew. Are you really going to ban your own family from your wedding? I told her that it was not about banning my nieces and nephew. They were not attending the wedding because it was child-free, and that the rule applied to everyone, and not only to her. I explained to her that it was not because we did not love the kids, but we wanted the wedding to be formal and adults only. The venue also does not allow children under 12 after 8 p.m., which would make it impossible for families with young children to attend the wedding. Despite all my explanations, she was not ready to listen. She was protesting, saying, "Ella has been talking about your wedding for months. You're going to break her heart. And what about Max and Sophie? Do you know how difficult it is to find a babysitter for 3 children?" I felt pretty bad, but I held my ground. I offered to pay for a sitter, or even to help find someone trustworthy around here who could watch them while she and her husband would enjoy the wedding. I even suggested they bring the kids to the town to spend the morning with them and then leave them with the sitter before coming to the ceremony. But my half-sister got angrier. She said in a drippingly sarcastic manner that I was making it impossible for them to attend the wedding, and that it was because she was my half-sister. I was stunned to hear this from her because I never thought like this. I always consider her my real sister and treated her on the same line. I told her that she was not alone. Plenty of our guests have small children, and they had no problem with it. They agreed to our arrangements because they respect our wishes. On this, she said that I was blaming her for not respecting us. I was trying to clear things, but she hung up the call and stopped answering all my messages and phone calls. Last week, I got a call from my father who told me that my sister said I was kicking her kids out of the wedding, and that I did not want them there. This really shocked and totally upset me. I never said that, but it sounds like my half-sister warped the conversation to make it sound like I was being a bad person, deliberately excluding her children. Now my dad has jumped in, and he is taking my sister's side, saying it's cruel not to include the kids. He goes on and on about how Ella is just devastated, because she really was looking forward to participating in the wedding. I told my dad that the thing is not to hurt someone, but my sister doesn't understand it. My dad says that I should let my sister's kids attend the wedding, and that they would just have some photos, and that is it, and that if I didn't allow it, my half-sister would not attend our wedding. I am very confused now. If I allow my half-sister's kids but not others' kids to attend the wedding, it would be very weird, and it would make things complicated for me. If this is the case, what is the point of having a child-free wedding at all? So, am I the AH here? OP is certainly not an AH, and she has every right to set clear boundaries. If she wants to have a child-free wedding, all guests must comply with the policy. If she allows her sister's kids to attend the wedding, it would make things complicated for OP, and it would be unfair to other guests. So OP's sister is being unreasonable and is an AH, so I would give her 1.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. As OP is in the right, she deserves a 0 on the AH scale. Let's now jump to the next story, where OP's half-sister always creates a fuss at school and have fights with other children, and their parents always support her and get embarrassed, and OP is fed up of all this. So, he tells his parents to teach her to mind her own business at school. I, 25-year-old male, have a half-sister, Emma, 14-year-old female. who always instigates dramas at her school and then cries wolf if people stand up to her. My parents are largely responsible for her behavior because they always support her no matter if she is right or wrong, and they have filled her mind with the narrative that it is always somebody else's fault. The latest claim from Emma was that a girl named Emily was harassing her and calling her ugly, bullying her for her body in the locker rooms. Obviously, my parents came to the school guns blazing to get Emily expelled for what she did to my sister. The school was prepared for this meeting and had 2 other girls there who were both witnesses to the incident. My parents claimed that Emily was bullying and harassing my sister, and the school brought the 2 witness girls to explain the incident. Both girls said that Emily was not bullying my sister. Instead, she accused Emily of checking her out. Emily simply stated that she wasn't checking my sister out or attracted to her at all, and asked to be left alone. Emily only spoke in self-defense after Emma approached her first, and didn't say anything else to Emma. If I were my parents, I would have apologized for what happened, made my sister apologize, and then grounded her for being a liar and instigator in the first place. But my parents did none of this. Not only that, they still think it was bullying and are threatening to sue the school for not defending my sister, punishing Emily, and disciplining the 2 witnesses for not intervening. Unfortunately, I am a lawyer, and I am receiving constant calls from my parents, asking me to help them take legal action against the school. Initially, I tried to convince my parents that it is a very strange situation and that the school is not at fault and there is no advantage in going to court, but they continued to call me. Last week, I visited my parents, where they pretended to be very disappointed with me and again asked me to sue the school, saying that if I didn't, they would hire another lawyer. Once again, I tried to convince them that the school was not at fault, but they were not receptive. So I finally told them clearly that they were wrong for supporting their daughter, regardless of whether she was right or wrong. I told them they needed to change their parenting style, and their daughter needed to change her behavior at school and mind her own business. I warned them that if they continued to support her this way, it would only lead to a bigger mess. Finally, I begged them not to involve me in their daily dramas, and then left. Now, my parents are angry with me. I am confused about what to do. Do you think I am wrong here? OP is certainly not an AH. Here, OP's parents are AH for supporting their daughter even when she is wrong. It is the worst type of parenting I have ever heard of. Here, OP acted responsibly by refusing to support a baseless legal case and advising his parents on proper parenting. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 out of 5, and OP's parents 2.5 on the AH scale. I, 35-year-old male, had my parents, both in their 60s, over for dinner this weekend. After dinner, my daughter, Emma, 10F, asked if she could play us a song she had been practicing on her keyboard. She gets lessons. It wasn't perfect, few missed notes, a couple pauses, but she did really well. She looked up at the end, massive smile, and I started clapping and my parents started laughing, not just a little chuckle, a massive effing belly laugh. And then, still laughing, my mom asked if it was her first time playing it. My daughter shrunk on the spot, and she looked down and said, "No, I've had 2 lessons, but doing it with 2 hands is hard." And they just laughed even effing harder. I just stood up, took their glasses and said, "Leave." My mom tried to say that they hadn't finished their drinks, and that they wanted to hear another song, etc. But I said, "No need to finish the drinks, just get out of my home, you misanthrope." My mom said that I was being impulsive, and that she didn't meant to mock my daughter. Rather, she was preparing my daughter for real world. I was very angry. I wanted to literally kick them out of my home, but I controlled myself. I said, "It's not teaching the real world. They're just nasty little bullies picking on children." I told them that I didn't need them to prepare my daughter for the real world. I would do it on my own. I told them to leave my home, or else I would have to resort to an alternative. Finally, the bullies gathered their stuff and left. After they left, I sat with my daughter and explained how proud I was of her, how well she was doing, and asked her to ignore them because they were just being cruel. Then, I asked my daughter if she could please play it again, which she did. On the weekend, I messaged my father and told him that until they can behave like decent human beings, they don't need to come to my home. My father replied that it was my choice, but he had not raised me to behave this way with my parents. I told him that I don't care how he raised me and what he thinks of me. I just don't want to see him and his wife at my home anymore. In the evening, I got a call from my sister, the golden child of my parents. With my parents' version of events in the head, she said that I was a nasty piece of work and should never speak to my parents that way, that I'm wrapping my child in cotton wool and blah blah blah. I just told her to go to hell and hung up. I'm not asking if I'm in the wrong for standing up for my daughter, and I never doubted I was in the right for standing up for my daughter. I was right, and I'll always stand for my daughter no matter who the hell I am facing. My daughter is the most important person in my life. The purpose of writing this story on Reddit is to ask whether I went too far, because I raised my voice at the end when I said, leave. So, am I the AH? OP is not an AH. OP was right to stand up for his daughter and defend her against the spurious ridicule from his parents. Emma felt proud of her performance, and instead of encouragement, OP's parents ridiculed her. OP's mom can claim that it's a hardening test for her in the real world, but in truth, there is no necessity to completely knock down a child's confidence in such a rough way. Kids learn with encouragement, not with criticism and anger. Yelling may be an impulsive response, but that doesn't make OP an AH, so I would give OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for OP's parents, they are AH, and I would rate them 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to another Am I the AH, where OP asks whether she would be an AH if she kicks out my 55-year-old brother who can't take care of himself. My 57-year-old female's younger brother, Dave, 55-year-old male, has always struggled to maintain any sort of independence. He's never held down a job for more than a year, and every apartment he's had has turned into a disaster. He has spent most of his adult life either with me, our elderly parents, or couch surfing between friends. At the moment, he is back on my couch, but I am at my end. Some background context. Dave has spent most of his adult life in and out of work. He is phenomenally intelligent, eloquent, and, when he chooses to be, witty. He just cannot retain a job or care for himself. He becomes overwhelmed, quits, and spirals into a depressive episode. Then, he comes knocking on either my door or that of our parents asking for help. The last time he lived with our parents, he basically became their live-in caretaker, though that didn't exactly work out as planned. My mom is 89F and dad 93M, so they're not the easiest to live with. They bicker incessantly, and arguments can be pretty lively. In time, Dave began to snark back at them. One night, things got heated enough for the neighbors to call the cops because they thought it was going to get physical. It wasn't, thankfully. After that, we made a plan that I would help my brother be independent. I asked him to move away from our parents and find a job and rent an apartment for him. Initially, he was hesitant, but agreed finally. I supported him financially for the movers, paid for his first few months of rent, and helped get him set up with a part-time job he could work remotely. But 6 months later, he quit the job and therefore stopped paying rent. He claimed it was too stressful. He couldn't cope with the workload. He spiraled again, drinking and sleeping all day and ignoring any kind of help. His lease ran out, and without warning, he showed up at my door, expecting to crash on my couch just for a couple of weeks. My husband was not ready to take him in, but I got him agreed, telling him that it would be temporary, but it is not. My brother has been living with us almost for a year and contributes nothing towards the household. I have tried everything, from helping him search for a new job, therapy, to giving him a timeline to find a place. He dismissed every attempt to kick him into independence. Every word is a repeat of, "I am trying," or "What do you want me to do? I have no money." It's like talking into a wall. Things became complicated lately when our 32M son came home after his breakup. He's having a difficult time and needs us for support. That's why I want to be there for him. Unfortunately, the presence of Dave is making things worse. The man is trying to rebuild his life, but with his chaotic uncle around him, it is quite hard. I raise the concern to Dave, and his reply always goes like this: "Where else am I supposed to go? I have nothing." Not that he is wrong. He has neither a job nor any savings or reasonable prospects for that matter. As much as he wishes to get back to our parents' home, they are fighting merely to stay afloat. They neither have the space nor the might in their minds to keep him there either. Now I am totally tired and seriously considering kicking him out to the streets or having to sleep in his car, but I am confused. So, would I be an AH for kicking out my brother? OP would not be the AH for throwing her brother out. Of course, she loves him dearly and has done everything in her power to help him, but Dave has continually refused to get his life together. Throwing her brother out is the only solution she has got right now. For the past 2 months, I have been cooking meals at home and taking my lunch to work. I work in an office where we all have our own cubicles, and the layout is large enough to be considered an office. In the past 2 weeks, someone kept stealing my lunch, even though I had my name and extension on it, and went as far as to wash out the containers and leave a thank you note. I wrote an office email, because I didn't know who it was, asking them not to steal my lunch, but it did not work. So I saw a couple of my colleagues coming in with a large lunch pail and leaving it in their cubicle. When I asked one of them, she said that's how you get to keep your lunch because the lunch pirates will steal your food otherwise. So I did the same thing. I bought a large lunch pail and like 6 of those blue ice packs that keep food cold, and now keep my food in my cubicle on a 3M hanger under my office sweater. An hour ago, I went to lunch, heated up my food, and sat down to eat. This co-worker, we don't work in the same department, so I don't really know her, asked me if I came in late. I said no, why? She said because my lunch was not in the fridge. I said it's because I keep it in my cubicle now because I'm tired of people stealing my food. The microwave pings, and I get my food out and proceed to eat. She put a styrofoam plate next to me, and I'm looking at her. She says, "Well, you can split your lunch with me because I don't have any." I looked her dead in the face and asked her if she was the one stealing my lunch. She said she didn't steal, she borrowed. I said, "Borrowed? So when are you going to pay me back? I'm not welfare. You didn't bring your lunch. We are literally in the middle of downtown. You can literally throw a pebble and hit an eatery. I work just like you. And if you didn't bring your food, you better go buy some because I am not sharing, period." I closed my food containers and was making my way back to my cubicle to report her to HR. She called me selfish. I told her she was an entitled thief, and I would be letting everyone know. So I reported her to HR, my manager, and her manager. I got 2 emails from people I don't know saying I should not have reported her because I don't know her situation. I emailed them back and told them they, nor she, know my situation, which is pretty good, but that's not the point. And anyone who is wearing Tom Ford pumps should literally not be stealing anyone's food. So, AITAH for reporting her and not wanting to share, and AITAH for keeping my food in my cubicle. It seems that OP is not an AH because there are clear indications that OP's colleague has been stealing his food. If she wasn't, how would she know that his food was not in the fridge? So, OP did the right by reporting to the HR. So, I would give OP 0 out of 5 scores on the AH scale. As for OP's colleague financial situation, if she had any problem, she could have asked OP or others' colleague for help, but stealing cannot be justified. So, she is an AH, and I would rate her 2.5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on the next story from Tim's third account, where OP wants to break up with his girlfriend because she turned off her location, got injured, and didn't tell OP when they had decided to go on a date. AITAH for wanting to break up with my girlfriend after she turned off her location, got injured, and didn't tell me? I, 25M, didn't hear anything from my girlfriend, 22F, all day yesterday, even though we had planned for her to come over in the evening. When she didn't show up, I started to worry. We share our Find My location for safety, especially since she often takes public transport alone late at night. I noticed her location was turned off, which was unusual and only added to my concern. As I hadn't heard from her, I reached out to mutual friends to see if they had seen her. One friend mentioned they'd seen her at her hobby activity in the evening, where she was with her mother and some guy. The friend didn't mention anything unusual, certainly not an injury, so I assumed she was fine. However, I was still puzzled as to why she hadn't contacted me or shown up. I tried calling her parents, who were annoyed I'd woken them up and didn't give me any useful information except for "she's asleep here at home, now good night." This morning, after a sleepless night, her mother finally got back to me and told me my girlfriend had injured her leg at work, possibly a broken leg, and that she was on strong medication, which is why she was asleep. Apparently, a coworker had taken her to the ER right after the accident. But none of this is making sense to me. If she'd injured her leg so badly, I don't understand how she was able to go to her hobby as my friend saw yesterday. Plus, it was this same co-worker she mentioned before, the one who'd picked her up from my place for work without me knowing. That was already strange because I've always told her she can ask me for a ride, and I'm flexible in the mornings. This happened like 4 days ago. The co-worker pickup. Not the whole thing, which happened yesterday. With her location still turned off and no communication from her, I feel like I'm the last to know anything. I'm seriously considering breaking up with her over this, as soon as she reaches out to me. If I were in an accident, my first request would be to let her know, and I'd hope for the same in return. AITAH for feeling hurt by her lack of communication, and the fact that she prioritized telling everyone but me. Edit. She still has our pictures on her socials, our anniversary on her WhatsApp status. That's a common thing to do. OP is not an AH for feeling hurt because of the lack of communication from her girlfriend. This is really weird behavior, but there is some hint of ghosting as well, given the fact that she has her location turned off and was seen by her colleague at her hobby activity. If she was seriously injured, how could she be engaging in her hobby activity with her family? Things are very unclear and unusual, but breaking up without any communication would be an impulsive decision. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 and OP's girlfriend 0.5 for not having proper communication with her boyfriend. Let's now move on to the next story from True-Strawberry-9409. AITAH for refusing to cancel my vacation after my brother demanded I pay for his emergency surgery instead. So here's the situation. I, 30F, have been planning a 2-week vacation to Europe with my partner for the past year. We've both saved up a lot of money for this trip, and it's a big deal for us because we've never been on a major vacation together before. The flights, hotels, everything has already been paid for. Last week, my brother, 35M, called me in a panic saying he needs emergency surgery for a dental issue. It's not life-threatening, but his tooth infection is bad, and it needs to be dealt with soon. He doesn't have insurance, long story involving bad financial decisions, and the procedure is going to cost about 10K USD. He asked me to loan him the money, but there's no way I have an extra 10K USD lying around after paying for this vacation. When I told him that, he got mad and said I should cancel my trip to help him, since family comes first. He even suggested I ask for refunds on the flights and hotels, as though that would magically solve the problem. I told him I felt bad for his situation, but I wasn't going to cancel a trip we'd been planning for a year over his poor financial choices, especially when this isn't a life or death situation. He lost it, called me selfish, accused me of abandoning him in his time of need, and got our mom involved. Now my mom is pressuring me to cancel and help him out, saying it's just a vacation, and I can always reschedule. But I don't think it's fair that I should be expected to sacrifice something I've worked hard for, because my brother can't handle his own responsibilities. AITAH? Is he lying about the cost to drain me off my money or something? OP is not an AH for refusing to cancel her vacation and give money to her brother, because she is not responsible for her brother's bad decisions in the past, and now for his surgery. Another point is that this is not a very serious surgery. If it were a serious one, he could ask OP for help, but here it seems that OP's brother just wanted to exhaust her and drain her of her money. In other words, he is being an AH, and I would give him 2 out of 5 scores on the AH scale, and OP deserves a 0. Let's now jump on the next story from yesterday, 3710. AITAH for ending my engagement because of his demands about our prenup. I, 37F, recently received a lump sum for a career project that turned into a whole company. I entered into an agreement with a company that has been reselling my services throughout licensing and long-term corporate JVs. When I signed the paperwork, I believed I had the opportunity to build a financial future without it affecting my relationship. However, this has not been the case, and I'm very put off, to the point of breaking off our engagement. We've been together for 4 years. I met him on the last leg of my struggle to achieve what has become my life's work motivation. This project has been all-consuming, and aside from that, I only had time for my family. I have very good friends, but everyone is busy. I didn't date or go out. When Sean, 43M, came along, I was swept off my feet because I wasn't expecting to find someone that I liked so much. We shared the same sense of humor, and I became really attracted to him, both emotionally and physically. Sean is divorced. He has average office assistant skills and works for a small government agency. Our salary gap was not a huge deal as I invested a lot in my project. So whatever money I kept for myself went to my non-negotiable priorities. I take care of my family and pay bills. He did have hobbies that he spent time on, but when I met him, he was in between jobs and had to wait 4 months until he became active at his new job at the agency. We were both tight on money. I was very happy to have a guy who didn't pressure me to wear certain styles. I'm more of a flats and comfy clothes lady. When my ex before him demanded that I look trendy and said things that nullified my self-esteem. I knew he was on food stamps, very briefly, and chalked it up to a bad situation that was temporary. There was huge mutual acceptance. We tried to start a small consulting company, but it didn't work out. I noticed that he wasn't ready to co-manage, and after a long conversation, we mutually decided to call it off. We had been talking about marriage for a while, and when he proposed, the subject of a prenup was no surprise, as we had already agreed on having one. Even if I had nothing, I see it as a way to protect ourselves and each other from potential situations. I'm in a niche market that deals with loss prevention, and I've seen people getting into lawsuits. We had drafted a plan but had some tense moments. He closed off at the lawyer's office and created a tense environment during our second meeting. Nothing that we had agreed on was getting followed through, and he kept asking for things and raising the bar. He got his own lawyer, which would have been okay except that he never told me, and his attorney showed up, and I didn't even know he'd hired one. We had to pause the prenup after he almost bit my head off outside of my lawyer's office when I refused to give his daughter shares of my existing company. That's a no-go for me, and I'd rather stay unmarried. I built that company to leave something to my children. I'm the only parent looking out for them, as my ex has been kind of a deadbeat. Sean wasn't even in the picture when I started it. I will not create a trust fund for his child either, like he asked. None of these requests had been previously discussed, but came up once his lawyer showed up. I did agree to help her financially, give her an allowance, help pay for a car, pay full health insurance, contribute to her college housing, and contribute to her education. She has a successful mom, so my logic is that she already has someone willing to give her a good start in life, since Sean isn't financially able. His daughter is an adult, 18F, while my kids are in grade school, and I need to make sure they are taken care of, while she's already at an age where she can get a job. I offered to contribute to a fund for her first home, but it seems like nothing I offered was good enough. I love his kid, but I didn't raise her, and she will never see me as her mom, and I respect that. Her mom's family owns a business, and her mom owns her home in a very good area. It's not like she depends on me to have a good life. I wanted it to be fair since her mom, Sean, and I could contribute. So Sean and I had an argument, because he sent me a breakdown of how much I'm supposed to make off my business over the next few years. I lost my temper because it felt like a gotcha situation. I confronted him about my own kids and asked what he would contribute to them. He went silent, so I said I wanted their names on the deed to a piece of land that he owns but hasn't been able to develop because he doesn't have the funds. He was surprised and accused me of trying to dilute his inheritance to his daughter and being generally unfair since she has less than what my kids will end up having. I just wanted him to see my point, but I made things worse. We used to be able to talk outside of the prenup, but now if I don't get his sarcasm, it's his dry behavior that's driving me crazy. He said he's surprised at my greed and accused me of othering his child. I'm trying to figure out if I came across as a bad stepmother. Also, I'm not ruling out helping all our kids start their own businesses if they want to, but I can't guarantee its success since we are not there yet. Canceling the engagement sounded like the most sensible decision, and I'm astonished this is actually happening. I don't know how to navigate. His last messages have been very hurtful, and he says I'm showing my true colors and told me thank you for my dishonesty about how I truly feel about his daughter. My best friend is pissed and threatens to put him on blast if he keeps this up. I'm confused since I didn't expect our relationship to end like this. AITAH? Update. I broke up with him since the whole deal felt like a bitter divorce rather than a step towards married life. OP is not an AH for ending the engagement because Sean's demands are unreasonable and selfish, particularly insisting on giving his daughter shares of OP's company. Sean should be grateful for the help OP has been offering for his daughter, but he is not and is behaving entitled. So, he is an AH for being selfish, and I would give him 2 out of 5 on the scale. As for OP, she deserves 0 out of 5 on the scale. Let's move to another story from Budget-Fishing 7420. AITAH for refusing full custody of my daughter after my husband asked for a divorce. I, 31F, have been together with my husband Alex, 33M, for 7 years, married for 4 years. Alex was always really excited about the prospect of children from the beginning of our relationship. I was always on the fence. I've seen how hard single moms have it. I promised myself I'd never be in that position. Plus, I work as a software engineer. I love my career, and I didn't want to give it up to be a mom. After Alex and I got married, those fears went away. We were very much in love. I felt safe with him. I told him my fears, and he said all the right things to make them vanish. So we tried for a baby and had our daughter Ramona 2 years after we got married. The pregnancy and first year with the baby was extremely hard on me. I had multiple health problems during and after the pregnancy that were life-threatening and altered my body permanently. I was disabled and nearly died once in the 6 months after I gave birth. And during this time, my husband grew distant and became angry frequently when we'd speak. I spent a lot of time in and out of the hospital and was unable to work, so a lot of the baby care went to him during this time. It was all I could do to stay alive and get better, being separated from my daughter and husband so much. Eventually, I did get better enough to help more with the baby, but after I was discharged from the hospital, he barely spoke to me. I want to clarify early that at no time did I ever neglect our daughter if I was able to care for her. I leaned on him a lot during this period, but I was also fighting for my health and my life so that I could continue to be there for her. If I had pushed myself too hard, I would have made it worse, or be dead. We stayed in a state of limbo like this for a while. I was still in recovery, not back to 100% yet, but able to resume a somewhat normal life, and we shared more responsibility with Ramona. I tried talking to him many times over the next 6 months, but it was more of the same thing. He wouldn't speak to me, or he'd get angry in every little thing I did, insist I was making things up and blame me for somehow criticizing him. It was a constant deflection from whatever was bothering him. I got another job about 9 months after the pregnancy, and things seemed to improve for a while, or at least I thought. Not long after Ramona's first birthday, Alex served me with divorce papers. He said he'd fallen out of love with me a long time ago and he was ready to start anew. I was in shock. Things had started to improve between us, but he explained that was because he'd decided to leave, and he felt less unhappy. It was a Saturday when this happened, so I made sure he was going to be home to care for Ramona for the weekend. Then I packed a bag and left until Sunday evening. I didn't say where I was going, and truthfully, I didn't really go anywhere but drive. I drove 2 states over by the time I stopped. I needed to think. When I got back Sunday evening, he was pissed I'd left him alone with our daughter. He's always seemed really put off any time he had to care for her alone. This time was no exception. I sat him down and very carefully said, "I will grant you a no-contest divorce, but I am not accepting full custody of Ramona." If he was only pissed before, he was explosive now, and everything he hated about me finally came out. That I was a horrible mother, that I wasn't strong enough to even be a mother, that I was too weak to carry a child, and now I was abandoning her. I very calmly stated that I loved her dearly and would not abandon her, that I would pay child support and visit her every other weekend, that I would be there for her in any way I could. But I had been very clear with him when we got married that I would never be a single mom. He became borderline violent at this, grabbing things like he was going to throw them and screaming that I was ruining his life on purpose. I wasn't going to stick around to be talked to like this, so I went and checked on Ramona, gave her a kiss, then grabbed my bag and left again. A couple days later, his mother texted me. He'd left Ramona with her for a few days, and she had some nasty things to say to me. That a mother should never leave her child, etc. I told her it wasn't her business, and that her son doesn't get a free pass to restart his life, because his wife nearly died when she was pregnant, and he became resentful with the responsibility. He's also blown up my phone asking me when I'm going to come back, so you can take your daughter. But I've only replied, I've already told you what's going to happen here. I love my daughter immensely, and I will be a provider for her. I will always support her, but I won't be her primary parent. So, AITAH, OP is not the AH for refusing full custody. She was clear about her boundaries from the start, and despite her health struggles, she hasn't abandoned her daughter. OP is still committed to supporting and being present for her child, but her husband's behavior, lack of communication, and anger make it unreasonable to expect her to take on full custody. She's protecting her well-being while ensuring her daughter remains cared for. Let's now move on to the next story from Boring Man, 1982. AITAH for telling my friend to stop mentioning pictures my wife posts. I've got a friend who the last couple of years has turned a bit tatey. He has been wronged by a couple of women in the past couple of years. One left him and got married within 3 months, the other stole a lot of his money. But he seems to have a particular dislike for women selling content, or just generally being confident in how they look. That point brings me on to my wife. She's 39 and we've been together since school. She's a very fit and attractive woman, and her main hobby is pole dancing. She loves it and has been doing it for a few years. She's really good and she loves it so much. It's great to see her really excelling at something and being so passionate about it. She posts a lot of pictures and video of herself pole dancing on accounts that only friends can follow. So it's not like she does this for attention. Even though I've told her if she ever wanted to, I wouldn't mind, as a few of her friends have quite big followings. And sometimes when they do shows, my wife is in the photos and videos and gets a lot of positive comments. At the weekend, I went to my friend's to help him with some DIY, and he asked me if I mind my wife posting what she posts. I said, not at all, it doesn't bother me. He then said, you are part of the problem. Women are getting too much ego, and it's bad enough when it's single women, but married women shouldn't be doing that. I told him, if he's that bothered, then don't look and unfollow her. He said that won't change anything, and it's the culture being created around women getting validation for their bodies or some like that. I got a bit wound up at this point and asked him if he'd like to ring my wife and tell her himself. He said no, he was just talking to me man to man, and I need to grow a backbone. I told him I'm not the one with the backbone problem if he can't handle a bit of flesh and gets offended by it, and he's the weak one. I ended up leaving, and a few mutual friends have said that while I was right, he's going through a hard time and is a bit vulnerable to this way of thinking. I personally think that's bullshit, and we need to tell him he's heading down a wrong path. Me and my friend are both 41. I forgot to mention that. TLDR. Friend is heading down a Tate wormhole and said my wife shouldn't be posting pictures of herself pole dancing. I told him to grow up and not be so easily offended. OP is not an AH here for defending his wife's choice to share her passion. Standing up for his wife's autonomy and calling out the behavior is completely justified. OP's friend has a very narrow mind, and his misogynistic behavior is not justifiable. No sensible person would tolerate it. OP's friend is a big AH, so I would give him a 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. As OP is completely justified, I would give him 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Practical Debate 807. AITAH for confronting my daughter-in-law about her constant lying and refusing to apologize. I, 56F, have a son, and things have been tense because of his wife, Emily, 28F. I've noticed over the past year that Emily tends to stretch the truth or flat-out lie about things, both big and small. At first, it was little things like saying she couldn't come to family dinners because of work, only to post on social media that she was out with friends. Then it escalated to bigger things. One example that really bothered me happened recently. We were both supposed to attend a charity fundraiser. I was there the entire evening and never saw her. When I later asked if she had made it, she insisted that she had been there the whole time and even said she saw me, but was too busy to come say hi. This wasn't true. I know for a fact she wasn't there. The volunteers list was small, and I definitely would have seen her. We were all in the same room. More recently, she lied about something involving a family event. We were planning a small gathering for my husband's birthday, and Emily told me she'd arranged a cake from his favorite bakery. The day of the party, she showed up empty-handed, claiming they lost the order. When I called the bakery to see what happened, they had no record of any order ever being placed. That was the last straw for me. I pulled her aside later and confronted her about her constant lying. I tried to be calm and respectful, but I told her that her dishonesty was starting to affect how I viewed her and that it was creating tension in the family. She literally messed up my husband's birthday with these lies. She completely denied it and got really upset, saying I was making her out to be a bad person and that I was overreacting. My son got involved and is now angry with me. The whole thing has caused a rift, and now Emily refuses to come to any family gatherings unless I apologize. I feel like I had every right to call her out, and I have nothing to apologize for. AITAH here? OP is not an AH for confronting her daughter-in-law about lying, especially when the dishonesty affects family events. However, OP could have approached differently and responsibly avoiding unnecessary tension. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 and OP's daughter-in-law 1.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from the _fat_ninja. AITAH for no longer being concerned that my son refuses to deal with me? Let me start this off by saying I love my child. I fought for many years with his mother to be in his life, only to be met with consistent resistance. She honestly didn't care if I was there or not. As long as the child support was paid, I heard nothing from her. I truly believe she did not want me in his life. Planning things on my scheduled visitations and not allowing them to be made up the following weekend got aggravating. When it came to things he wanted to do, I was not going to stop him. I did not mind sacrificing the time. I understand he's going to want to hang out with friends, his girlfriend, and go to family events. I made the biggest mistake by telling her one day that he could come when he wanted. He has friends, a girlfriend, and is a teen. I understand. I was that age once. Let him have fun. This ultimately backfired. After that phone call, I saw him once more, and that was it. To this day, I do not know what was said to him, and that was 7 years ago. I don't have his phone number or email. To be clear, he's now an adult, and I still don't know his phone number. He refuses to see or speak to me or anyone on my side of the family. She let him talk to my mother before she passed, so she could say goodbye, only to turn around and say, I kept it from him, knowing I told her long before. I ended up having a conversation with a friend about this, as she had asked me about it. I told her, I've yet to hear from him, and am not worried about it. I've stopped worrying about things I can't control long ago. She asked me a question, how would you feel if he never bothered with you for the rest of your life, never let you know if you were a grandparent, and just never let you know anything about his life? I told her I had thought about that before, and to be honest, it wouldn't bother me. I've been estranged for 7 years now. I've missed all the major milestones, missed seeing him become an adult, and at this point, I have no idea who he is. He is basically a stranger to me. At some point, you accept that this is your situation, and there's not much you can do. After a while, you stop caring because you realize you'll drive yourself crazy and keep yourself depressed over something you have zero control over. This answer did not go over well. Let me state this first. She's married and has children. I believe this will add context to why she responded the way she did, which I understood and respected, as we all have our views, but I do not agree with. She said that I have become heartless, cold, and she can't believe I'd think that way after all the years of fighting I did. She said she never in a million years would think I would have thought like that. You are a parent. You are supposed to never stop fighting no matter how many walls you have to climb. I'm truly shocked and disappointed that you'd think like this. I love you. We've been good friends for many years, but I can't agree with your line of thought on this. So Reddit, what do you think AITAH for my view of this situation with my son? OP is not an AH here because he had been trying to be the part of the, but he was always met with rejection. Now, if he has decided to move on, he must not be blamed. At least he is not an AH, so I would give him 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, and his ex-wife deserves at least 1 out of 5 on the AH scale. Now, let's move on to the next story from major_opposite_9592. AITAH, for calling my stepmom selfish during family therapy. I'm 17F in family therapy with my dad and stepmom. My dad wanted us to talk through our problems because my stepmom has been really upset lately that I have shut her out of my life in a pretty big way, and she just wants to be closer. My mom died when I was 5, and I have 2 older brothers who are 20 and 23. My stepmom moved in when I was 8, and she and my dad got married when I was almost 11. We always got along okay, but I never thought of her as a second mom or the strongest mom figure in my life. My mom left videos for each of us. My dad got some birthday ones and a Christmas and wedding anniversary video. My brothers and I got every birthday until 18 that she'd miss, milestone birthdays, Christmas, and big events like our own weddings and babies. After Dad remarried, I started to watch mine more at Christmas, and I'd maybe watch my birthday videos twice. My dad remarrying made me think of Mom more and made me miss her more. It felt more real that life had moved on without her, and Dad really fell in love with someone else. My dad watched his whenever his birthday or Christmas would happen too, but a year after he remarried, he turned 40, and she started making faces whenever one of us would watch a Mom video. And whenever Dad would smile watching the video, she would look annoyed, pissed. After that, she suggested she could keep mine safe for me because I was so young, but I didn't trust her to do that. After 3 years of noticing this stuff, she told Dad the videos made her unhappy and uncomfortable, and she felt like an outsider at Christmas when he looked so in love with my mom. She also said she felt like the videos were a roadblock between her and us, me and my brothers. Dad compromised that he would watch his less, and she wouldn't say anything to us. I saw my dad struggle with that for years. I saw him go to watch one of Mom's videos and stop himself. Then my stepmom and I started fighting because I didn't want her to touch the discs the messages were recorded on. She was also upset when my brothers did backups of all the discs, so we'd always have the messages, even if the originals were broken. She told us we valued those more than we valued most people. Dad told her to leave us alone. But I stopped being as friendly with her as I was, and shut her out. I left her out of prom stuff last year that she wanted to do with me, and I always say no to hanging out with her. This brought us to therapy, and last week I spoke my mind and said I think she's incredibly selfish for making Dad feel bad about watching the videos Mom left for him. I said Mom was his first wife, the mother of his children, and if she really loved him, she'd want him to have them. But she doesn't like knowing she came second, and yet she joined the family anyway. I also mentioned why I never trusted her with mine. She was so upset because she had no idea I had picked up on and heard so much. She cried and said I didn't need to destroy her feelings like that. AITAH? OP is not an AH for expressing her feelings and would be rated 0 on the AH scale. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye bye, see you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.